I am dining in. Are you? Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's a beautiful Sunday afternoon, and we're preparing for class 2. So, this is the review of the slides. Again, not going through every part of the slide, but really focusing on just key things that I would say about each slide so that you can gain the information if you happen to miss a class. So, we're going to skip through the agenda and we're just going to get to slide number 5, which is fasting rules. And really, I think the key issue about this is who should not fast. And the key points are, if you're type 2 diabetic on insulin, we have to be careful. We have to see how your body responds, because sometimes we have to feed the insulin so that you don't have a low blood sugar episode. So if you are going to choose fasting, gradually expand it out. Be careful. Make sure that you're talking to your healthcare provider and adjusting your insulin to avoid that low blood sugar. Individuals who are post-bariatric surgery, this one's a different issue, not necessarily related to blood sugar, but more related to the need to get protein into your system. So you can fast, but you just have to make sure that your eating window contains the protein that you really need. Hypoglycemia or reactive hypoglycemia, rare conditions. Reactive hypoglycemia almost always is due to actual food consumption, so that's probably not going to be a factor with fasting. If you don't have sufficient body fat or you need to take medications, you may have to adjust your windows and figure out how you can fast with that. You can still fast if you don't have a great deal of body mass, but the question is why are you doing that? It may be for weightlifting or other types of reasons, and so that might be appropriate. Children, we definitely don't want young children to be fasting. That's a key, but teens may be able to do some intermittent fasting, but we have to make sure they're getting the protein and fat that they need to keep their bodies growing the right way. So just limit that. Other rules for fasting: basically, fasting is no water, coffee, tea, and broth or bone broth. If you're extended fasting, this is a strict rule of the definition of fasting. The longer fasting that you do, you want to add in that bone broth or broth. It's not required. Now, rules for fasting for you? There are no rules. This is kind of like Fight Club or something like that. We can do what we want. It depends on your desires. So if you want to add in a diet soda, if you want to add in low sugar creamer or something like that for your coffee, you can do that. So just make sure it meets your goals. Remember, fat does not break the health benefits of prolonged fasting, but may impact your weight loss, because our body always is going to burn the outside fat first. Protein and sugar/flour will impact the long-term health benefits of fasting, but not necessarily the weight loss. So but will impact the weight loss as well. Ooh, that was a big error. Okay, so now we're going on to slide number 7. Just kind of the definitions. The only thing I want to point out here is that 5-2 diet. That is where you eat normally for 5 days and then you fast for 2 days. Now, we have a lot of people in our classes that will be largely doing extended or intermittent fasting during the work week and then have a little bit more flexible schedule on the week. It's really not the 5-2. They're doing 5 days of intermittent fasting and then 2 days of regular eating. Alternate day fasting is where you do very low calorie on one day, less than 600 for men, less than 500 for females, that mimic fasting, but then on the other days you eat normally. So that's an alternate day. You can still lose weight with that. Whereas with the 5-2 diet that's talked about on the slide 7, it's really, you're not going to really lose weight. You're probably going to maintain the lost weight. So this may be more of a maintenance type diet that you go to. Going on to slide number 8, which is just reviewing the protocols and how we change our relationship with food. I think all of this material is pretty self-explanatory, except when we get down to the bottom about ketogenic. Just want to emphasize that virtually all diets today are ketogenic in some way, or they manage insulin in some way. Weight Watchers does it through the point system. You get more points for things that are going to be higher glycemic index foods, potentially higher fat foods. Nutrisystems, they have low glycemic index foods by pumping fiber and other fiber-like substances into their food to manufacture that food. HMR, they work on kind of feeding the brain enough glucose to keep it happy so it doesn't go through that headache and brain drain quality, but then forcing the body to really burn our body fat. And so their diet is a little bit unique that way, and that's why it can have the effect of the brain kind of keeps going in the right direction. People say they feel really well, but they never go through that switch over to where ketone or true ketogenic. Vegetarian obviously is going to be low sugar, low flour, but sometimes vegetarians can add in a lot of sugar and flour, so we have to be careful with that. And it's not going to necessarily lead to weight loss if you're adding in the sugar and flour. So if you really want to lose the weight and be a vegetarian, then you definitely got to change some things. Now on to slide 9, what we can eat. We recommend whole foods. That's ideal. Our body understands them. Our body understands what they are. Processed foods, our body does not understand what they are. They are a mystery to our body. When they come in, our body has to try to figure out what to do with them. They've got all sorts of preservatives in them. Our body can't recognize them. So just be really careful with the processed foods. Try to shop the store around the perimeter where most of the whole foods are. Now we're on to slide number 10. I've already reviewed this slide before, so I'm not going to really do anything with it, but just I want to remind you that the only true way that you can limit insulin in your body or avoid any insulin release is by not eating, so fasting. But the other ways are trying to limit that. What can we eat? Well, we can eat any protein. Choices we make about that are really easy for us. With cheese, we can eat, but just remember cheese has carbs in it, so if you start adding that up, that's going to influence it. Also, cheese can be constipating, so in the context of fasting, we already may have some constipation going on, so we just have to be aware of that. Fat is fine when we're on low sugar, low flour, and fasting, but remember to avoid fat when we combine it with sugar and flour. Then they get stored together and we get the triglycerides. We can just remember that we are not trying to eat a high-fat diet, because the high fat comes in and then our body processes that before we eat our own fat. We really want to eat our own fat. So just make sure that high fat is not what we're going for, but use fat to manage your hunger freely. And I think that's okay. We just don't want to act like our diet is a high-fat diet. Starchy vegetables. So now we're on to slide number 12. Maybe we can eat those, maybe we can't. We just want to pay attention to how our body feels and how our goals are being met. General vegetables, you can eat whatever you want. Generally, you just kind of find out how they work for your body. Fruits, avoid the sugary ones, and maybe eat fruit alone. Because if we eat fruit alone, then our body will kind of burn off that sugar right then and there. If we eat fruit before we exercise, then it will definitely burn off that sugar right there, and it will have less impact. Alcohol, whole big different issue. We're going to talk a lot about this in class. Grain alcohol, very little sugar impact initially when we take it in, but several hours afterwards we'll start to see a raise in our blood sugar as it metabolizes the alcohol. That's a problem. So we have to understand that wine, pretty good blood sugar impact, beer, massive blood sugar impact. So your protocol is your protocol, but understand what your goals are and figure out if it's something that you can live with or without. Now we're going to go into hormones. We've already talked about insulin, so we're really not going to talk about that. So we're going to go on to slide 14, which is really talking about leptin. I think the key with leptin is to understand that this is the hormone that lets us know when we're full, and that we don't need more food, but it's also the hormone that tells us we should be moving. And so that release of that leptin is really important. Now, leptin should be present at high levels when a person has a lot of fat on their body, leading to less desire for food. The problem is that oftentimes when we have fat on our body and our blood sugars are elevated, insulin is present, and then insulin is going to impact or block the release of leptin. So now we feel like we don't need to move, we feel hungry more, and we eat more. And that's the problem with insulin, again, impacting a different aspect of how our body is supposed to work. So reducing insulin allows leptin to be released. We become hungry less, we want to move more, and we eat less. So this is great news if we can reduce that insulin. Now on to slide 15, ghrelin. We've mentioned ghrelin before, but I just want people to get aware of. Ghrelin is the thing that helps us understand when we're hungry, but also when you're not hungry. And so ghrelin works by identifying the volume of food that you just consumed and the fat content in the food. So if we eat a high fat, high volume food, we're going to be not hungry at all. We're going to stop eating very quickly. And what we found with ketogenic or low sugar, low flour diets is that people were eating sufficient fat and volume of food, and they didn't feel hungry very much, and so they would go without eating for long periods of time because their ghrelin was satisfied. And so they tend to absorb less calories to begin with. Ghrelin is the reason why low-fat diets failed, because we were maybe getting in enough volume, but we weren't getting enough fat in, and therefore we were hungry all the time, we were miserable, we were horrible. That's a bad outcome. We can't identify high sugar foods or drinks through ghrelin, so it just passes through our system and our brain doesn't recognize all the sugar, and therefore we can continue to eat sugar and flour on top of sugar and flour. Summary of the hormones, I think we can go through that. I think the most, on your own, that's slide 16. But the key thing is by eating less frequently, we're going to have insulin drop and allow it to resensitize in our body, leptin to start working, and ghrelin to adjust. And then what happens is we're going to get, if we do this long term, we're going to start to have normal cravings for food, normal desire for food, hunger back to normal levels, and we're going to have a better relationship with food. Briefly, we're going to talk about exercise. Exercise impacts that glycogen store in our body. So if we exercise in a fasted state, essentially what's going to happen is we're going to run through that glycogen store really quickly, and we're going to go right into eating our fat for energy. That's great. So if you can exercise in a fasted state, that's a huge benefit on a daily basis, because you're going to burn up those glycogen stores and get right into that fat to eat for energy. If you exercise at all, it's still going to impact that glycogen stores and get into that idea that we can start to eat our own fat. Now, if we do eat fruit, for example, before exercise, our body will recognize that we're moving, and it won't need to store that energy. It'll actually say, you know what, I'm going to be okay because this guy's moving, so let's use that stuff up. So that's kind of the slides for today, and that will be class 2 slides, and we're just doing this YouTube video to support the slides so that if a person can't come to the class or has some problems hearing on the phone or whatever, they can always review it. Slides are pretty self-explanatory. As always, you have the big manual. Next week we're getting into the fun stuff, which is emotion and how we manage our emotions and our thoughts. This is going to be great. This is where psychology really comes to bear, and it's going to help you out so much. You're going to learn so much. By the end of next week, you'll probably know how to do my job better than I do, and this will be awesome for all of you. You'll learn how to manage it. So we're going to go through that stuff next week. Hey, I wish you a great week. I think you're doing awesome. Keep up the great work, and any comments that you have, I'd be happy to hear. We want to give you every support that we can. Have a great week.